Okay, we're going to continue on with the study guide. I think we're at number 10 right now, and you should be able to answer that one, I would think. Um, so on to 11, Euthyphro's first definition of piety. He basically points to an example. He says, what I'm doing right now is pious, and that's prosecuting his father for the killing of a murderer. And Socrates refutes that definition because he said, I'm not asking you for a particular example of piety. What I want you to tell me is what makes something pious in the first place. And merely citing an example does not do that. So on to the second definition. Euthyphro says, something is pious if it is loved by the gods, and it is impious if it is hated by the gods. Socrates gets Euthyphro to admit what was then an obvious truth, that there is war and disagreement amongst the gods, and therefore one and the same action is loved by some gods, hated by other gods, which implies that one and the same action is both pious and impious, and that, my friend, is a contradiction. Not good. So that's his refutation of the second definition of piety. On to the third definition of piety, Euthyphro amends this very slightly, which is just the right thing to do. He says, well then, what is pious is what is loved by all the gods, and what is impious is what is hated by all the gods. So now we won't have that case with the second definition where one action is loved by some, hated by others, and is both pious and impious, because it's only pious if it's loved by all. So none can hate it. Okay, where are we at here? So that's the third definition. This raises the distinction. Socrates, I'm sorry, in number 16, now raises the distinction. Let me get a look at this here. Raises the distinction. So he asks whether something is loved by the gods because it's pious, or if it's pious because it's loved by the gods. And think about that for a little bit, but it's different. If something's pious because it's loved by the gods, it's the loving of the gods that creates the piety of pious acts. If something is loved by the gods because it's pious, then the gods are responding to the independent piety of the thing, and it's because it's pious already that they then in turn love it. So it's kind of which came first, the loving of the gods or the piety of the act. That's a big difference. We would call the difference between an objective reading of piety and a subjective reading of piety. The objective reading means that that would be in the case where the gods love something because it's pious. That means the piety is in the thing itself, already and independent of the loving of the gods. The thing itself has the piety. If something is pious because it's loved by the gods, then it's the very loving of the gods that creates the piety, and that's a subjective creation of the gods. Piety is. Piety doesn't exist in anything until and unless it's loved by the gods. So it's the subjective response of the gods that creates the piety in that second term. So number 19, what does Socrates mean by the term form? If you look early on in Euthyphro, you'll see in a footnote, there's, I think, a perfectly fine definition of what a form is, and it's all over the internet, Plato's theory of forms. Basically, it's something like this. The form is an essence. It's something like this, where we would say, look, there's a lot of good things, but there's good people, there's good places, there's good beer, there's good actions, there's good governments, all of these things. So the question that Socrates would want to know is, what is the one thing that all of these good things possess which makes them good things? They must all have this one nature, goodness, if they're all good things. They're all in that category. So there must be some true single essence of goodness itself that all of these things possess. And that's what we want to know. At least that's what Socrates wants to know. About piety, about truth, justice, all things. What's the form, the real defining essence of all of these things, not just a number of examples? That's when we really understand the concept. So, 20. How do human beings capture a form? And by capture, I don't mean like gather it and capture it physically, but mentally grasp it or capture it in mind. They do that by providing what Socrates calls a universal definition. And that's why he asks you to throw for definitions, because the correct definition is the one that accurately describes the forms. So it's kind of a small point. Don't worry about 21. We're going to kind of skip that, and I think I'm going to pause for the moment.